everyone, and welcome to ProWritingAid 101 for business writers. I'm Micah McGuire, ProWritingAid's B2B Digital Marketing Manager. And today, as always, I am joined by Tom Wilde, our Head of Client Solutions. It is great to have you all with us today, and we're super excited to jump into another 101 session. Today, we're going to be covering a few different reports within the Chrome extension. We're actually going to be starting off there today. And then we're going to be going over 5 of the most useful reports for business writers, including the summary report, the readability report, the sticky sentences report, the style report, and of course, our spelling and grammar report as well. Then we're also going to be covering a little bit about some of our favorite tools for business writers, including our style guide and our snippets tools. But of course, as always, we want this to be driven by what you guys would like to know. So we're going to be having a short Q&A session at the end. Please feel free to submit any questions that you have during the demo through the Q&A box. We'll make sure to get to as many of them as we can. If we are unable to reach your question for any reason, please feel free to go ahead and send it in to hello, H-E-L-L-O, at ProWritingAid.com. And that will just mention that you were at our 101 in the subject line, and we will make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Again, that's hello, H-E-L-L-O, at ProWritingAid.com. All right, Tom, let's get started.
Great. Thank you, Micah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. Great to have you with us. So as Micah explained, we're going to do a lot of demo today in the Chrome extension. We're going to run through some of the core features, some of the core reports, really to give you a flavor of how ProWritingAid can help make you a better writer, how it can help improve your accuracy, your efficiency, the quality of your writing, and also help you learn on the way. ProWritingAid is like it's like the editor on your shoulder. Or, as a client recently explained to me, it's like a second pair of digital eyes. It does not replace the human. That's not the intention, but it enables you to focus on what's really important. It takes care and sweats the small stuff while you're able to focus on structure, the argument, and everything else that is the really important stuff.
And
Okay, yeah, go, Micah.
We're also a tool that is used by professional editors and publishers as well. We actually just had a recent session in which one of our publishers mentioned that she has run probably hundreds of manuscripts through the tool, and she says that every time she runs a manuscript through, the program still catches something. So we've got to remember that ProWritingAid has its place with tracking some of the things that human eyes are not great at, but it's also to help you work on the things that we really should be looking at, like the structure, the flow, all that good stuff, just like Tom said.
Yeah, that's right. And it's designed to work where you are. So these days you may be writing, you may be using, like say, Microsoft Word, you might be using Google Docs, you're probably using a different platform or program for email, maybe using something different for customer service. ProWritingAid has a whole range of integrations from an API through to browser extensions, Word add-in, Google Docs add-on, even our own desktop app. So it can really write or be with you wherever you are. If you're not familiar with it, I certainly recommend downloading it or rather signing up for it after today's session. You can sign up to the free version, but we also offer free trials of the premium version too. Okay, so what I'm going to do is share my screen and we'll take a look good and early at what it looks like. Now, we designed the user interface of ProWritingAid to look the same wherever you write. As I said, we're going to focus today in the Chrome extension. It's because where most of our business writers are. You know, they use the Chrome extension because it allows integration with all sorts of web apps, whatever applications you're using, whether it's your customer service application, your email client, or whatever. And here I've got an email window. So I'm using Gmail. I've got an email window open, and I've got a this is an email drafted for a client. Okay, so it's a sample email. And you can read through it. If you take your time to read through it, you'll see you can probably find a few mistakes and a few ways that it could be improved yourself. But that's going to take you, 1 or 2 proofreads and edits to do that. If we turn on ProWritingAid, which I'm going to do up here, so you can see I've got the Chrome extension installed. If I enable it, first thing that's going to happen is the real-time checker is going to kick in. That means it's going to start scanning the document for improvements in spelling, grammar, style, readability. Okay, and you can see all these color highlights have already appeared. And as I continue to type, more and more highlights will appear every time it spots a new error. So it's really working while you work. It's acting, if you like, as your buddy in the flow of work. What do the highlights mean? Well, you can see they're color coded, okay? And you can see, and each of those color codings relates to a different category. Now, if I go down to the bottom right-hand corner of my screen, if I click on the ProWritingAid target symbol here, it will open a pop-up that contains a heap of information. It's separated into two separate areas, goals and improvements. Let's focus on improvements first, because that's what these highlights are. Now, I can tackle these improvements in one of two ways. I can work my way down through the document, just hovering over some of these. And you have to forgive me, actually, I've been doing some work for a client, and some of these I need to ignore because they're not typically representative in the tool. They're picking up custom rules that I've created for a client. So let's start slightly further down. Start with carry out. And I'm really sorry, that's another one that's a custom style guide rule I've created for a customer. Okay, here we go. As I hover over focus here, it's spotted a possible missing comma before a prepositional phrase. Now I can navigate down through the document itself, or I can navigate down through this floating window, this sidebar here. It doesn't really matter. It's up to me. It's up to personal preference. Either way, as I work my way down through each of these, I can correct it simply by clicking here in the teal area. That's if I agree. If I don't agree with a suggestion, and ProWritingAid won't force anything, it requires you to make every change. But if I agree with the suggestion, I can just click here. If I don't, I can ignore it here. If I don't want that rule to be active at all in any writing I do, I can disable a rule, but just a word of warning there, disabling a rule is a permanent change. You'll need to contact our customer service team if you want that rule re-enabled. So use ignore more frequently if I were you.
And also, anything that is ignored within the document will be reflected in both your goals and your improvement sidebar. So that's really a better reason to use that other than using that disable rule, because again, that disable rule is slightly more permanent and will require that contact with our support team to get it re-enabled. So use ignore pretty much at free will.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to one of the next issues, this is one of my favorites because it's all about passive voice. And the passive voice is the scourge of business writing for many of us. It's not incorrect, it's a style point. However, when we read, our brains work in such a way that the active voice is usually easier for us to process. So it's easier, it's better for your reader if you present your writing using the active voice more frequently than the passive. But we defer to the passive in business because it gives that air of well, sometimes it allows us to not take responsibility for our actions, but other times we just default because we think it makes us sound more important. This is not true. Use the active where you can. Now, maybe you don't understand the difference between the passive and the active, and if you're educated in the UK, that's highly likely. It's not on the syllabus over here. So in that case, this is where this little information icon flashing away here comes in super useful. If I click on that, it's going to open another window that explains all about that particular grammar point. So here we're looking at the difference between the passive and the active voice. And there's even a video embedded here where we use Jackie Chan to explain some differences between the active and the passive voice. So there's some serious learning in there too, and some reinforcement. So this is not just about a quick fix. It's building your skills and capability for the long term. Writing is a skill that takes time to work, takes time to improve, takes time to perfect. And resources like this will help you on that journey. Okay.
And I think ask any writer and you'll find that it's truly not one that is ever mastered. We just keep getting better at it.
Absolutely.
Tom, did we want to touch on some of the filtering within the improvements bar?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great point, actually, because I mentioned earlier on that there's some color coding here. If you open the filter here, you can see those color codes relate to the categories of grammar, style, spelling, and passive voice. and I can deselect or select any of those. So I'm focusing on one area at a time. Really useful. It's a really useful editing technique. Just focus on one area, get that right, and then move on to the next. For the purpose of the demonstration, I'm going to enable all filters. You probably also notice here that I've got a selector for the document type. Now, as I change my selection here, so right now, I've got a general email, you'll see the changes are reflected in my goals tab. Now, goals is the other tab on this floating editing screen. And it presents a range of metrics relevant to that particular document type. So here, my goal for grammar, spelling, and style, you can see here is this bubble here at the top of the range is 80% or higher. My grammar, spelling, or style should be hitting 80%, but actually, right now, I'm hitting 40%. I'm way off target. And all of these ones in orange are off target. Sentence length, 21 words per sentence is my average. It's too long. Your average sentence length should be between 11 and 18 words. As I scroll down, we'll probably find, yeah, there we go. So we've got a couple of indices that are within target range. So passive voice is okay. My inclusive language, I'm okay, so that's a good one as well. And weak adverbs, I'm not using too many weak adverbs. However, if I change the selection here, let's look at the difference with sales email. Sales email is going to present a different range of metrics because there are different key indices for a sales email. So for example, it shows me a score for my customer focus. It shows me a score for how many we, you linkers I'm using. So that's where I'm doing the sales technique of relating what I'm offering to the client's requirements. It gives me a grade for my positivity, for my spam phrase count. So these are more relevant for sales emails. And you can see under this drop down, there are all sorts of different categories, and we're adding to these all the time. So it just allows you to really tighten up and measure your writing relevant to the particular document type you're doing. Okay, excuse me. Back in the document, as you see, back on the passive voice, it presents several different options. It's trying to rewrite that clause or that sentence using the active voice. So we've held several meetings, is the active version of several meetings have been held. That's the one I want to use. Click here to use it. I'll drop it in and move me automatically to the next, which is a spelling error. Okay, again, click here, move on to the next. Sorry, that's one that's introduced for my client. But you can see how we work. We just work down through a document. And this is down to your personal preference. Everybody writes and everybody works in a different way. So it's really important to get to a feel for ProWritingAid over a couple of weeks while you're working on some documents. Understand where the benefits are to your writing. How do you like to integrate it in your writing habit? Okay, and the more you use it, the more familiar you become with it, and the greater the benefits you'll derive from it too.
And the more familiar you'll become with what reports are most useful, which does, Tom, are we ready to move on to perhaps summary report?
Exactly that. So what we're going to do now, we've shown you the real-time checker. That's the first stage. Now we're going to go into detail, go in deep on this document. To do that, I need to open the full editor. That will open from within Chrome. Likewise, from within any of our other integrations, you can access the full editor. The user interface that you'll see in a second once it opens is exactly the same in all of those integrations. In fact, I can show you right now, if I open Word, which I should have here. Okay, you see this ribbon across the top? All of these different reports here are exactly the same as what you'll see. If I close that window, yeah, there we go. So this is the Chrome extension, the full editor opening up. Now from here, obviously there's a lot I can do. And we just want to stress the point. The intention is not for you to run all 20 reports because that's going to take an inordinate amount of time. It's not going to help your writing habit at all. Understand which of the reports, so work to understand which of the reports are most valuable to you. Most of our users usually are running 3 to 4 reports at the end of every document or every paragraph or page. You'll see some immediately stand out as not particularly relevant. Some are more relevant to fiction writers. In the business world, we're much more interested in things like style, grammar, repeats, overused words, transition, readability, and sticky sentences. And we'll run through a few of these today. Where do we start? So the obvious thing to do is run the summary report, because that's going to look at the document as a whole, and it's going to report a whole bunch of key metrics for you. And it presents them like this. Grammar, style, and spelling are always at the top. They're the most important metrics. And it breaks them down into each specific category. You can see I'm under target for each of those. Below the summary, below those headlines, I've got the areas where my document is looking good or great even. So all of these are on target. My readability grade, good, sentence variety, question count, all these areas are on target. And then below there, I've got the areas where my document needs more work. And we know about things like grammar and style, but also look, we've got a glue index that relates to those sticky sentences. We've got sentence length. So I need to work on some of those. Now, in the summary report, there is a huge amount of detail. And once again, you don't need to wade through all of it, but it's all there and it can be good reference points. So a really good example here is the readability check. Now, I'm on target in readability, but I'm at the top end of the range. And if I look at this really simple to understand graphic, I can see that around 10% of my paragraphs in terms of readability are very difficult to read. Okay, so maybe actually that's a good place to start. Although it's on target, let's have a look at the readability report. So let's close the summary and run readability. And many of you will be familiar with readability. Many of your organizations may set a readability target. Readability target, well, there are several different readability targets, in fact. You can see here that we present 4 alternatives. So Flesch Reading Ease, Flesch Kincaid grade are probably the 2 that you recognize the most. In terms of grade, this is telling you the grade. In fact, Micah, you're usually really good at explaining this, so I might hand over to you.
The Flesch Reading Ease and the Flesch Kincaid grades are actually linked. So the Flesch Kincaid grade is based on the Flesch Reading Ease score, but what it is doing is translating that Flesch Reading Ease score into a grade school level. Your recommended range for that is between a 6th and a 10th grade level. And the reason for that is not because you're trying to address a bunch of middle schoolers to early high schoolers, but simply because in all of the analysis that we've done of easy to read writing, that writing tends to fall in that range. So it's less about who your audience is and more about that if it is understandable by a middle schooler or an early high schooler, chances are it'll be a much easier read on your audience regardless of who you're speaking to. So it's good to keep it in that range. You can see we're at an 8.8, so we're kind of on the top end of the scale there. So there are some things we can do in this document to improve. And Tom, do you want to cover just how readability is calculated?
Yeah, let's do that. In fact, yeah. So in fact, first of all, let me just, so you can see very quickly, very easily, because it does the work for you, which is the difficult, which are the difficult paragraphs to read, because they're categorized here. So just open that filter, click on the arrow here, and it'll highlight the paragraph that is very difficult to read. Now, how's that calculated? So that reading ease score of 44 there is calculated by taking the average number of words per sentence, and it also looks at the average number of syllables per word. So if you want to improve readability, you need to reduce the average number of words per sentence and reduce the average number of syllables per word, which generally means simplifying some of your complex vocabulary. Now, there are a million ways AI could rewrite a paragraph like this. So it's pointless us trying to present the correct paragraph to you. It's simply highlighting the fact. So as the writer, you need to go through that paragraph. You need to look, okay, there's a long sentence. Can I split that sentence into 2 shorter, more easily understandable, more easily to read sentences? Is there some terminology in there that I should simplify? Okay. Yeah,
I
Micah.
think it's an awesome chance. Can we show the word explorer off just very quickly with maybe some of those more complex words? Because
Yeah,
we do have a tool that can help you find some simpler synonyms.
Yeah, so let's go with intermediary. In fact, do you know what? Yeah, no, let's do it with intermediary. There we go. So I can click on any word, double click on any word in this, and it will it'll open its window, the Word Explorer window, with a range of synonyms that you can use. So you could see, likewise, I could do it for enthusiastic down here. There we go. All sorts of different synonyms for enthusiastic. And I can open the Word Explorer, so that open the full Explorer, and it goes into a heap more detail. So I've got everything from a reverse dictionary through to a thesaurus, synonyms there, contextually related synonyms, alliteration, okay, common adjectives that you use, okay, none in that instance, collocations even. So typically adjectives used before enthusiastic and after enthusiastic.
And if you're not familiar with the collocation dictionary, all this is looking at is certain words that are commonly used around the word that you're looking at. So in this case, these would be words that are used before enthusiastic as far as adjectives. So you can split, as you can see, it's split into adjectives, adverbs, nouns, and verbs. This is great for those tip of the tongue moments because you might know that there's a word that you have in mind that you know it's related to the term you have there, but you can't quite get it. Sometimes between the thesaurus and the collocation dictionary, you'll find that it does eventually come back to you, or you'll have to cross it in the collocation dictionary.
Yeah, exactly that. So you can see that by little, you can make some marginal gains here, make some changes that will immediately start to improve the readability. So you can do that yourself. But equally, you can look at the other reports to help improve each of the paragraphs in this document. So it's probably a good time to do that. Let's dive in with style. So style is probably the most, I'd say between style and grammar, probably the two most commonly used reports out of the whole suite, particularly for business writers.
From our recent sweep, it looks like that's the case. So
yeah, absolutely. So, and you can see with the style report, it categorizes readability enhancements, passive verbs, hidden verbs, style improvements, long subordinate clauses, adverbs. Yeah, there's a whole heap of stuff here. Again, some's related more relative to fiction writers, but these ones at the top are going to be really important. Simply expand the window to have a look. Okay, and you can work your way down through each of these. So let's have a look just by clicking on, we've got two examples here. So a bit. Do you actually need to use that? Okay, or actually, are you saving the reader some effort if you just remove a bit? Because inform our decision better is probably just the same as inform our decision a bit better. So we can just remove it. So it's, again, readability is all about making the transfer of information from the page to your reader's brain as straightforward as possible. So it's simplifying your sentences. It's not dumbing down, but it's making things simpler and easier to understand. Likewise, so the majority of, let's have a look at that one. Okay, so rather than majority of, let's just change that to most. There we go. We'll accept that and move on. You can see I can even open a thesaurus from within this window here as well. Okay, so I'm making incremental improvements as I work my way down, just like in the real-time checker. It's suggesting changes. One click can make the change or can ignore the change. It can even add things to my dictionary. And by the time I've reached the bottom of the document, I've improved it paragraph by paragraph, and I can move on to the next report.
And one thing to always keep in mind with the style report is, unlike, say, something like our grammar and spelling report, which is a little bit black and white, it's either an error or it's not. This is much more up to individual writers. So the style report is not necessarily saying, oh, you know, this is absolutely wrong for you to use this. So you may find some scenarios that you look at stuff and you go, actually, I disagree in this case. I want to keep that wording as is. Let's say you have a reason for using the passive voice. In a lot of cases, let's say you're a journalist and there's a perpetrator to the case that is not known. And the only way that you have to get that across is in the passive voice by saying, you know, the shop was broken into by someone, something like that. In those cases, that is a correct use of the passive voice, so you don't need to change that. So just keep that in mind when using this report, is that these are recommendations rather than saying strictly, you know, this is incorrect versus correct.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Micah. I was also hoping to highlight the dictionary. Let's just see if I'm just going to run the grammar report to see if we've got some typos in here, because there's a useful feature. There we go. So you can see an unknown word here. So I've got a spelling issue, an unknown word. Now, let's just pretend that is a word that I want to use. Maybe it's a technical term. You can see it gives me the option of adding it to my dictionary. So every user has their own personal dictionary within ProWritingAid. You can add to that dictionary simply by adding from here or within the settings of the tool. So as you go, you're building your own resources as you go. All right, so that's style, very briefly done. Grammar, you can see, is very similar. You know, I can look at all my different grammar issues here. I can then navigate to any of them. So there we go. I've got a missing quantify most of, I'm saying most our stakeholders rather than most of our stakeholders. So we'll make that change. Let's move on to sticky sentences, because it's my favorite. So sticky sentences is unique to ProWritingAid. That's the first thing to say. And what it's looking for is what we call glue words. So this is the report that's related to the glue index that you saw in the scores. Glue words are the 200 most commonly used words in the English language. They are typically prepositions, articles, and so on, that help provide the gel, if you like, around the working words. But if I've got too many glue words in a sentence, I'm wasting my reader's time. And in fact, our research shows that if your sentence has more than 40% of its words as glue words, you could basically be saying the same thing much more simply, okay, with far fewer words. So again, you're saving your reader time and effort. If you think about the documents you read on a daily basis, if someone were to be more concise, you would probably thank them for it. So let's have a look at the sticky sentences. Here we found 3 sticky sentences. You can also see ProWritingAid measures semi-sticky sentences too. That's the same, but with a lower threshold, or rather higher threshold. Sticky sentences are where more than 40% of the words are glue words. Let's navigate to the first one. Here we go. So the glue words in this sentence are just, wanted to, up, about, the, over, last, or so. As you can see, they don't tell me anything about the context of this particular sentence. They're not the working words. So if I can cut some of those out, I'm doing the reader a big favor.
And as you can see, there's actually only 6 of those words that are considered working words. So
yeah, absolutely. So again, you may look at a sentence like this. This is going to take this is down to you to change this sentence, because again, there could be thousands of ways to rewrite this sentence. But my recommendation, if I were to look at this again, just wanted to catch up about the project we've talked about over the last month or so, well, we could cut that in half just by saying, just wanted to catch up on the project. You know, it's going to make the reader's journey far easier. I'm never very good at typing live. So if I can just delete there, it's much easier. Let's run the report again. Okay. Oh, and it's still rating it as a sticky sentence. Okay. Okay, so I need to make, well, I've reduced it by half, but it's still rating those as glue words. So maybe I want to change those again. Maybe I'll focus on 1 or 2 of the others further on. But it's a good indicator of the sentences that might trip your readers up. Okay, let's have a look. Now, while we're going on, I think Micah mentioned about posting questions. If you've got any particular reports you'd like to see, you'd like to talk about, do shout out. I'm going to highlight one last one because we're doing quite well for time quickly. It's all repeats, and it does take a while to run. Oh, in fact, no, there we go. So, and this tells me how frequently I'm using the same word or multiple word phrases. So you see here, I can see in this document, I'm using the 3-word phrase to carry out twice. That's okay in an email, but if that was 5 or 6 times in a short email, that's going to come across as very repetitive to the customer and frankly, quite boring. So it's a great way of highlighting what I should do to change it. Don't worry too much about all the color in the report. The important information is here, but I can navigate to each of those. And as I highlight each one, the tool will suggest alternative possible phrases. You'll see it also highlights, it calls them 1-word phrases, but it's just single words. So I can see very quickly, I'm using a word like team 7 times. So again, You know, as humans, we tend to use quite narrow vocabulary. So this is a really useful report because computers are great at spotting patterns. Okay, and if you are repeating yourself, your reader will probably spot it. So this helps you to diversify your vocabulary, how to broaden your vocabulary. Okay, let's move on to some of the other features, I think, at this point. So to do that, I'm just going to close this. By closing that window, it will make all of the changes or save all the changes back into the document that I've got open wherever I'm using the Chrome extension. But to look at the other features within ProWritingAid, I'm now going to go into the website, or what we call the web editor. So if I navigate to this page, you can see I'm now logged in at ProWritingAid.com. I've got this menu down the left-hand side, and I'm showing you the style guide page. And the reason I'm showing you the style guide page is because it's an incredibly useful function, particularly for teams and organizational users. You probably have some form of a guide that defines how you should write within your organization. Some of those rules will be very specific to your organization. And wouldn't it be great if you can produce them or reproduce them within ProWritingAid to automate them, if you like? And you can. It's a fairly straightforward process. You can create rules for your own personal use, but also you'll see down here, here's my ProWritingAid team rules. So any rules I create under my team license will automatically apply to the other people that are part of that team license. Let me show you an example of a couple of rules. I'm just going to open this up a little bit. You can see some now. Style guide rules can be everything from the very straightforward to the very complex. Let's start really quickly on one that we created for Pennsylvania University, or I should say the University of Pennsylvania, because that's their brand name. It's not Pennsylvania University. And in fact, they got so frustrated with staff, faculty, and students using the term Pennsylvania University that we created a really simple rule. So whenever somebody uses the term Pennsylvania University while they are running ProWritingAid on the machine, it will automatically flag it, just like everything else in the real-time checker. It will automatically flag it and suggest the replacement along with this message. So you can see, to create a rule, all I need to do is complete these 4 windows. To show you what I mean, let's just go into a window. Let's just move this text down. Test this with a sample sentence. Shut the real-time checker on and off. And there we go. There's my rule that I've just created. Never use Pennsylvania University. Our brand name is University of Pennsylvania. Now that is admittedly a very simple one. And we get into much more complex ones, including, you'll see here, there are some rules. Just scroll back up. We can even create rules that allow you to identify things like the Oxford comma. So here we're using parts of speech tags, which are linguistic terms for almost a coding term, if you like, for how we classify particular words. And we complete a string of tags that identify a pattern to the machine. And basically it's saying, if you see a singular or plural noun or gerund, followed by a comma, followed by another singular or plural noun or gerund, followed by a coordinating conjunction, then because this has got a tilde, this is a possible. So followed by a possible determiner, and finally a last singular or plural noun or gerund. If you see that string, replace the string. So these tokens, so $0, $1, it's basically telling the machine to replace all of these words in the same string, but introduce this comma because that is the missing Oxford comma. So you can see, appreciate that's a very, very quick look at that. But you can see the kind of power you've got here. It uses regular expression too, so you can get some really complex rules, and we can help with this. So we have an NLP team that work on a consultancy basis for organizations that have long and complex style guides and they want to automate. We can do that work for you, but we do have a couple of blog posts and a couple of guides to help you get started. Micah, I think you're going to post those in chat, is that correct?
Yes, those have just been posted. Now we have our guide to simple style guide rules. This is kind of our style guide 101 article. It's not going to touch on anything like the tokenization or the parts of speech tags that Tom mentioned. That is going to be more in depth in our creating advanced style guide rules. So if you're interested in all of the fun coding aspects of the style guide, definitely check out that advanced style guide rule blog article. And if you're just getting started, you may want to start with our style guide 101.
And if you need help, just get in touch with our support team. Okay, we love solving these challenges. We are a team of writers, linguists, educators.
Our NLP team lives for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
They love a good puzzle and a good challenge. So always feel free to send those in.
And they haven't been beaten yet. Okay, apologies if you can hear a meowing cat down by my side, but let's carry on. I've got snippets to show you next. Now, snippets are a relatively new tool to ProWritingAid. We built them earlier this year, and we're really proud of them. And they have revolutionized some of the customer service teams we work with. So snippets is our text expansion tool. They allow you to create pre-completed chunks of text, sentences, paragraphs, complete sections if you need to. And simply by doing that and formatting them here within snippets, you can then create a shortcut and just drop those into your document at the by using the shortcut, so at the click of a button. So you can see, again, I've got snippets that are personal, I've got snippets that relate to the ProWritingAid team. You can see here we use them for really obvious things. How many times have you been asked to write your company address and you have to look it up and write it out? Here, I've just got my company address written out. It's a really simple one, but whenever I now just use this shortcut in a document, it drops it straight in, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. In my role, in a kind of sales role, I use it for lots of pre-formatted emails. So I have a really simple email here that welcomes new people, new trial users to ProWritingAid. You can see here's the email. I can format it in rich text. I've created a shortcut. And now if I go back into the sample email, let's just create some space here. And close that down. And I start to write the name of the shortcut, and there, it drops it straight into the document. So you can imagine the kind of time this can save to people who are using the same, identical chunks of text time and again. Okay, and the last, I think the last function I'm going to show you before we move into some questions is really just about how, as a team, you can get the most out of ProWritingAid. And this makes us a little bit different from some of the other providers too. So at ProWritingAid, with a team license, you're buying a number of licenses, but how you manage those licenses is up to you. If you have team members that leave and you want to reassign that license to somebody else, that's absolutely fine. You can see from my team user management page, so I've just gone into Teams here, I can see I'm an administrator here. Can see all of my team licenses. I can see a summary of how many of those licenses I'm using. I can assign individuals here to be users or administrators. I can remove users. So you can see I can click on Chris Banks. I shouldn't remove him because he's the CEO, but I can, and I can then reassign that license to a new user. So it's really useful if you've got a moving team and you want to use those licenses that you have judiciously.
And we have a lot of really exciting functions coming out for teams, including, I think we have collaborations that are coming out soon, and basically document sharing. So if you're familiar with the way that Google Docs work, where you can kind of see where other team members are working on a document kind of in real time, see where their cursors are, all of that good stuff, we are looking to start rolling that out hopefully soon, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. It's in testing at the moment. It's a pretty hard nut to crack, but the dev team have been working on it for quite a while. Okay, and I think with that, it kind of brings the demo to an end. We've taken up 40 minutes, so I appreciate you all giving us that time so far. Let me just stop my screen share for the moment, and we'll dive into some questions.
I think we've got a couple. Let me just make sure that I've gotten.
Okay. So if you have got a question, just add it to the Q&A box and we will go from there. While we're doing that, actually, one of the questions that regularly comes up is about user reporting, and you can There are metrics within the tool that can show you how often your team are using ProWritingAid and how many suggestions, they're accepting. So there is user reporting within ProWritingAid, and it is another feature that we're building out. So there will be more data available through that in the future.
And another one, really common one we get is around security and just data retention, all of that. Basically, our system is built to be as secure as possible. We run on Microsoft Azure servers, which are highly secure, and the program is built so there is no data persistence within any of our integrations. The only data persistence that would be present would be within our web editor, and that is only if you save documents. And that's just because we have to have a function for you to be able to come back to those documents and access them again if you have saved them to the web editor. But if you are super concerned about data security, definitely use our integrations. Those are built to be highly secure. And for those teams that maybe need some extra help with security, let's say you're a financial institution, somewhere like that, that you have to be very careful with, say, client data, we also have an option to do on-premise deployments in which our program will be run totally on your own servers. It won't be going out of your system at all. It is basically just linked to your company's servers only.
Yeah, that's right, Micah. And in fact, we will soon be SOC 2 certified as well. So that's quite an exciting development for us. So that should overcome any outstanding security concerns as well. The other, I just wanted to mention on that point as well, Mike, it's a really important point here in that we don't claim any rights to your writing. So our belief is that your writing belongs to you. We don't use your data to train our machine learning models. So we acquire a large amount of data, very large amounts of data from professional editors, and that allows us to train those models, the AI that's working in the background. So that means we don't need the rights to use your writing to do that. And we can provide that extra layer of kind of security and privacy for your work.
And all of our AI training is still coming from real people. It's just real people who we have the rights to actually work with their suggestions and everything else.
Right.
So like Tom said, professional editors that do this kind of thing for a living. Tom, we have a couple of really interesting questions here. We have an individual that was working on a book in Google Docs, and the Chrome extension said the file was too big. So what is the largest file size that can be edited outside of the web editor? I think in this case, could this be linked to the whole Google Docs integration versus the Chrome extension?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. It'd be interesting to see this because it's not something we see commonly. Not something I'm particularly familiar with. It'd be interesting to see because normally, if it were the actual size of the document that it was struggling with, it would just provide a warning that you are about to analyze a long document, and it may take a long time if you're talking hundreds of thousands of words. So I think on this case, I'd say the best thing to do would be to contact our support team. I also manage the support team, so I will pick up your query. But if you can provide a screenshot of the message you're getting and explain it in a little bit more detail, then we can definitely help with that because it doesn't sound like it's not something that should be happening. So we should be able to help.
And we have another great one that if you ignore a document in document number 1, I'm assuming we're working in the web editor here. Please feel free to correct me if I'm assuming incorrectly on this. But if you leave the document, then come back to it in the web editor, are those rules that were ignored previously still ignored?
Yeah, great question. Yes, and this is something we changed earlier this year through some more development work. So ignores are remembered. So you will be able to see, you will be able to ignore something and go back to the document, close the document, reopen the document, and it will still be remembered and ignored.
And if in any case you see an issue in which it is not being remembered, let us know and we'll get our dev team on it.
Yeah, and in fact, that's reminded me of a really good point because something we didn't show, Micah, is that from time to time, if there is something you don't agree with, and you think maybe it's a false positive, because let's face it, this is all built on AI, which is about training models. Okay, so from time to time, it will report a false positive. Everybody does it. So we need your help with that, because if you see a false positive, then you can report it. In fact, what I could do, let me just see if I can open the tool and show you how to do that. Let me just share my screen quickly.
And this is
Um,
also the case that as a really complex program, some users have reported in the past that they have run into cases where the program recommends against itself. So let's say it says to put a comma in one spot in the sentence and then comes back and says that that comma needs to be moved to a different part of the sentence. If you happen to run into those scenarios, definitely report that as an issue in this way, because again, those are things that we can get our NLP team and our dev team on so we can get those fixed.
That's right. So you can see from within any of the reports where I've got an ignore as an option, as soon as I hover on ignore, report incorrect comes up as a button that I can press. As soon as you click on report incorrect, that will be logged with our NLP team. It means they're on it. It may take some time to fix, but it means we're notified, and we really appreciate our customers' help on that. We have over 2 million users of ProWritingAid worldwide, and we really value the community, and the input we get from that community. So yeah, do help us with that.
And Tom, speaking of input, we have actually been running a survey with our B2B users that I am sure some of you guys have seen. It went out on our newsletter probably about 3 to 4 weeks ago. But if you've not had the chance to take that survey, we would love to hear from you. I'm going to be posting that in the chat now. And it's just a quick survey, should take you less than, it's the type form says taking less than 10 minutes, but honestly, looking at our results from our users, it should be less than 5. But it just gives us a little bit more feedback on what you guys love about the program, what you would like to see changed, that sort of thing. And we love hearing from you guys because it's all things we can use to help improve the program in the future and make it to where it's an even better tool for all of you to use.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Micah. Great idea to get the ask for help on the survey. Would really appreciate that. I also just wanted to end by saying, ProWritingAid works in other places you may not realize. So, for example, we partner with people like APA. Many of you will be familiar with APA, the American Psychological Association. And we are the tool that powers the spelling and the grammar checking within their academic writing platform, as we are with many other publishing and learning platform providers too. So we have an API. In fact, we have a couple of different API versions that customers use to integrate with their own platform in that way. If that's of interest to you, then by all means reach out, because there's a good chance we can help you if you're providing a SaaS service or platform to your users where grammar, spelling, and style checking built into that would provide added value.
All right, well, Tom, I think we have all of the Q&A covered for today. So
Great.
I think we can go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah, and
All
I'm
right.
just looking at Jennifer's comment in chat. Thank you very much, Jennifer. New user to ProWritingAid and enjoying it so far. That's great to hear, and that's why we put this
Fantastic.
session on. It's for new users who want to learn more.
Exactly. All right, everyone. Well, thank you all so much for attending. Have a great rest of your day.